Welcome back, everyone, to another episode on the Winning Browns podcast, where now more than ever, two Indian kids are going to win more subscribers and more games and more of everything than the Cleveland Browns have. And boy, oh boy, has this been a tumultuous season for the Cleveland Browns, who went through yet another hula hoop in their 2024 season um, this past Sunday, being in the fact that starting quarterback Deshaun Watson tore his Achilles virtually, and well, not virtually, but without pretty much guaranteeing the end of his 2024 campaign. And I know I've been critical of Deshaun Watson in the past. I don't feel really comfortable to really say anything in this matter, given the fact that it's an injury, and I know that there's circumstances outside of his play on the football field that
Right.
contributes polarizing figure. But at the end of the day, I don't feel that it's right to really go and let it not just celebrate, but even kind of make the comment that about um, what Watson's future opens for the Browns against his own situation. What I will say is this definitely I'm not going to beat around the bush. It does open up a lot of doors for the Browns. We don't know what their season's going to look like here. Their quarterback room looks interesting as far as what happened on Sunday. Jameis Winston, who I'd been talking about as maybe potentially the starter, he got demoted to third string, well, backup
Yeah,
after Watson got tore his Achilles. And then Dorian Thompson-Robinson, who was the backup to Watson, then got hurt. So then Jameis Winston ended up playing anyways. What does this mean for the 1-6 Browns? Um, it doesn't look like it's going to mean any sort of playoff appearance. Uh,
yeah, for
this
sure.
team has bigger problems than just the quarterback room. You talk about an injured to hell offensive lineman. They lost Amari Cooper to a trade recently, and their defense is nowhere close to what it was last year. So this is one of the more interesting 1-6 teams as far as talent wise.
For
But
sure.
just given as far as the Winning Browns podcast, they surely won't be winning as many um, games as we have won subscribers this year. So
For sure. When I look at the Cleveland Browns franchise right now, I mean, we took just a year back. We're talking about maybe one of the best defenses we've seen in the past decade, if not the best defense we've seen in the past decade. I'm not going to sit here and say that defense is abysmal. That defense is still a very good defense. Like if you look at it from a statistical standpoint, film standpoint as well, to a decent degree, you could say that's a top 10 defense, and I wouldn't be mad. I really wouldn't because they have the talent, they are playing like it. I mean, you look at the Philadelphia Eagles, they gave up 20 points. You look at pretty some formidable teams, they played pretty well, but it's the offense that's just been horrible. And I think the thing is, you can't also blame Kevin Stefanski on this end. I think it is from an organization standpoint is where the lies when it comes to Cleveland Browns. I saw this one thing. I don't know if you saw it, Yash, as well as the viewers at home. On Pat McAfee's show, there was a clip where I think one of the I forget his name right now, but one of the insiders to the NFL, he was mentioning over the next 2 years, guaranteed Deshaun Watson's going to earn 80 million a year, guaranteed. And this is for a guy that, let's be honest, was the way that he was treated 2 days ago at Cleveland an embarrassment for human decency and individuals? Yes, that was a horrible incident that happened. Regardless of what that man has done or what he went through or if he did it or if he didn't, I'm not going to get into those details because I will say it myself, I'm not knowledgeable enough to speak on those details. You don't boo a man like that when he's lost his season. He's a football player at heart. He has nothing in life other than that. YouTube, like people say, oh, you can transfer to YouTube. Tom Brady has 167,000 subscribers on YouTube. That's nothing considering he's the GOAT, right? So when you think of it like that, this guy's life is the NFL, and you just boo him on the field. Well, for what? Not throwing a ball into the end zone? I mean, I
I'll
get it.
say, and
Look,
I'll add to what Akilish says, but go ahead. I'll let you finish.
Look, I'm not going to sit here and say that you should defend Deshaun Watson. No. you should be a true fan and say where it's wrong. You shouldn't be a Dallas Cowboys fan, okay? But at the same time, my point is, I'm gonna throw in those disses anytime. But my point is, you have to be a little bit decent, have some human decency. Deshaun Watson has underperformed massively. This has been a lost cause as an organization for the Cleveland Browns. But at the same time, I personally believe that should have never happened, regardless of who it was. That is unacceptable.
And what I'll add to it is even if Watson did some of the stuff that he had been accused of, and some of the stuff that he's been accused of, I'm not going to go into detail, but it's some heinous stuff that most people would, otherwise be sentenced very seriously for in the judgment of law in this country. Um, what I'll say is that even if he did those stuff, us celebrating something that has completely no relation to those incidences and is not in any way justice. Okay.
Mhm.
Akhilesh and I are firm believers of karma, but that cannot be, that cannot be
Yeah,
expressed for everyone in this country. We are, as in the United States, it's a freedom of freedom of expression, freedom of religion country that its law is not defined by any sort of religion, right? I don't want to really get too much down that line here because we might get
sure.
political. But what I want to say is if this incident has nothing to do with his football incident, and like you said, Akilesh, we have no idea whether he did it or not, right? We weren't
Yeah,
any women, we weren't Deshaun Watson. We weren't any of the people in the room during the time that the incident allegedly happened.
sure.
So if we're just making assumptions based on what we read and celebrating something that is completely unrelated, what does that speak on us, even if he did that stuff? He might
Sure.
have been what he might be a terrible human being. He might be the greatest human being on the planet. It doesn't matter. When you celebrate any person's injury like that, when it has no relation to the accusations, that just speaks on how low you are being at that moment as a
Yeah,
human being yourself. So
exactly.
so for any Browns fan or any fan in general who's celebrating Deshaun Watson's injury, just take a step back. Just be honest. Don't have to get into being emotional with, your judgment towards
Yeah.
anything. I think that's something just in society that we need to work on, not just in sports, but in general. But that's a
Look,
different
I,
topic.
I get being a fan. I get being a fan of the game. But at the same time, we have to remember this is a ball that's being thrown into people's hands and going into the end zone. Now, the classic argument to that is, yeah, same deal, except they're earning millions while most of America is trying to work as hard as they can to earn $100,000 a year. I completely get that, and that's a completely fair argument. But for those same exact guys who are trying to catch that ball, trying to make the plays on the field, who are earning that much amount of money, when they're injured, they have nothing. When we get injured, when we get a sick day, we might get paid for a free day, you know? So it goes both ways, and I completely get it. But at the same time, we have to look at ourselves in the mirror sometimes and say, no, we can't be like that. And I'll add myself in that category. I might have done the same thing, and I'll apologize if I have done that or if I did do that. But at the same time, it's just some of those things are not acceptable. Now, kind of moving on from this Cleveland Brown situation, interestingly enough, the trade deadline's coming up. And this trade deadline is quite an interesting one. You have a lot of options, a lot of different things teams could be looking into. What we want to kind of go over is our top three trade deadline moves. Like it has to be done. Prior to going into that, Yash, if you don't mind, I know this was kind of our plan, but if you don't mind, I think we should spend a little bit of time on just overall the NFL teams that have been just balling out, teams that haven't. Um, you know, just maybe three teams or so that you just feel like have surprised you in a positive or negative way. And then yeah, I'll go off that. And then right after that, what we'll do is we'll kind of go into our top three trades that should be made by the trade deadline. So I'll hand it off to you, Yash, and then we'll move
Yeah,
forward.
so certainly. Since we want to start off specifically with the teams that have surprised. Um, I'm going to start off.
Actually, you know what? If it's you can be
No, no,
teams,
I'll start off
players.
with that because I think it leads in better, honestly. But
Okay,
what I will say is the number one team, and I think this is for this reason is going to be a team that's very much a low end buyer in the market, but that's going to lead to some interesting time moves. Is the Washington Commanders. This is a team that I did not really expect much out of the Commanders. I wasn't per se I wasn't per se like a big Jaden Daniels hater in this draft, but he was of the six quarterbacks that I had in the draft, he was the lowest of the six. On top of that, he's a rookie. This was a Washington Commanders team that pretty much is on in the form of rebuilding. They don't really have that much talent around him compared to the rest of the NFC. I really did not expect that much out of Washington as did most people. Not many people were even really most people were very skeptical on the coaching staff too, and they've done a phenomenal job with Cliff Kingsbury and Dan Quinn. Um, but this is a team that still has a lot of holes. They're 5-2, if I'm not mistaken. They played very good football, albeit they've beaten up on some weaker teams, but they've still fought really, really well against teams like the Baltimore Ravens, and things like that. So, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And to me, that kind of speaks on if this team really wants to at least make a, not a playoff push. I think that they're very much at the forefront of making that playoff push. Granted, things could change if they collapse down the stretch. That's not the first time that a Dan Quinn coach team in his first season would have collapsed like that. The Falcons start off 5-0 in 2015 and finished 8-8. As a Niners fan, I very much remember one specific game that the Falcons choked. There's a whole entire SB Nation video on that, so I highly recommend that for anyone who wants to look at it, especially if you're an analytics geek like me. But regardless, um, this is a team, like I said, that has a lot of holes. You want to try to make that push maybe a step further, like what you saw out of the Texans last year with CJ Stroud, show some promise. And Jaden Daniels, he's having a generational start for a rookie quarterback. So you really want to build around him, at least see what you got in him to the maximum extent in his rookie year, and then go from there. I see the Washington being a top end buyer, and they eat, like I said, they are very much been a surprise team in that sense. The next team I'm going to say that has been very much a surprise for me has been the Los Angeles Chargers. Not in a good or bad way, just based on more of the roster in particular. This is a team that we know almost always has very intriguing amounts of talent. We look at Justin Herbert, one of the best quarterbacks in football, Jim Harbaugh, Jesse Minter, what that coaching staff has done. For anybody who wants to know about Jesse Minter's coaching staff or Jesse Minter's coaching scheme, excuse me, there are plenty of videos on YouTube that will be able to explain it better than Akilesh and I can. He has been an absolute defensive genius to start off his tenure in the NFL. But I've talked about this before. This Chargers defense has a lot of intriguing pieces, guys who were kind of, misfit toys on other teams, guys like Christian Fulton, guys like, what's his name? Elijah
Elijah
Molden.
Molden.
What's the defensive? Puna Ford is another one. Denzel Perryman is at a career
Keep talking.
right? So, I mean, we're talking about these defense pieces kind of just being temporary pieces of the puzzle, but there's still a couple pieces missing. You still have star power in the likes of Khalil Mack, Derwin James, Joey Bosa, but you need to fill in those pieces if the Chargers really want to make the playoff push. I think they want to make that playoff push. I think that they're going to make moves in that sense. And the third team I'm going to say for that same reason is the Pittsburgh Steelers. This Pittsburgh Steelers defense got off to a really, really, really hot start. They've still been very, very good, but to be fair, they have played against some very mediocre offenses. Granted, this Steelers team has a lot to work with at different positions. Justin Fields was playing very well when he was starting, and Russell Wilson had a very good game last week against the Jets in the second half. George Pickens, Calvin Austin have played pretty well. You want to probably add a little bit more depth in that receiving room. I see the Steelers maybe going for a low-end trade target in the receiving room. They have a pretty good run game. They have pretty good tight ends. Maybe they want to add a little bit of depth to help one of whoever their quarterbacks have been. Maybe they want to add another extra defensive piece. To me, the Steelers are that third team who's going to make an interesting trade move at the deadline.
Okay, I'm gonna kind of start off with the surprises for me. I'm gonna start off with, frankly, biggest surprise for me was the Kansas City Chiefs. In this sense, Patrick Mahomes in this current moment in time might not be a top 10 quarterback in the league. I think we have to take that in for a couple of seconds because this is Patrick Mahomes. You know, a couple of years back, Yash and a couple other idiots, with all due respect, came up to me and said, "Oh, Patrick Mahomes might be that next GOAT. He just might be better than Tom Brady."
I didn't say that. I said that he might eventually.
Might. That's the key word. Couple of these idiots all of
Say
a
the full
sudden thought that
sentence.
this was
Say
the
the full
magical
sentence.
season after Patrick Mahomes threw for 182 yards and had some lucky rushes. And I still say this, the Philadelphia Eagles would have won that Super Bowl had Jalen Hurts not fumbled that ball. Everybody knows it to be true. Let's not stop acting like this was all some Patrick Mahomes hero stuff, okay? The guy had less than a 40 QBR rating by the end of the third quarter against a 49ers defense, with all due respect, Josh, is not very good. Is not very good. Did he have, but my point is this. Like, everybody's keeping this team as the number one team in the NFL. I get they're undefeated, yeah, but their offense is below top 15 offense in the NFL. They are a horrible passing team. Travis Kelce is having the worst season of his career. Understandably, the guy is edging on retirement. Okay, understandably, he's probably
Hey,
going to go
hey,
into a musical career. Who knows?
hey,
But
he's got Taylor Swift as his, girlfriend. I'd
exactly.
be
So
distracted if I had Taylor Swift. No, I'm kidding.
sure. Oh God, stop it. All right. Okay, moving on. But you have a lot of young
I'm just saying, I don't
receivers
blame him.
who, I mean, sure, but like you have a lot of young receivers who are just not greatest blocking receivers, so you can't really have a most effective run game. But at the same time, you also don't have the greatest big time receivers. That might be something that comes up in the trade line. We don't know. The other thing that comes with this is Patrick Mahomes has had this innate ability to short pass or long pass effectively. In this case, he can't long pass it, and he also can't short pass it. Because everybody's being focused on that short pass element of Patrick Mahomes' game, that when he tries to release it up, because guys are very, very fast, but also he doesn't have enough time. Their offensive line is good. Okay, they have one of the best centers in the NFL, like without a doubt. But at the same time, you have to look at it as this offense is horrible compared to what they've always been, right? And that's what the point I mentioned to a couple of these idiots a couple of years ago. It's the fact that no, I will mention you guys as idiots. It's the fact that no one ever measured Tom Brady receivers with the receivers Patrick Mahomes had. Did Tom Brady have Rob Gronkowski? Yes, sure. Yeah. From 2010 to 2019, he won 3 Super Bowls. Who was his best receiver? Julian Edelman. You know how many times Julian Edelman has had 1,000+ yards in his career? Very, very few. Very,
One.
very few. One. One. And I think they won the Super Bowl that year, if I'm not wrong. I don't know. Maybe it was the year before. I don't know. Right? Patrick Mahomes has had Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, very high quality guys. You have a guy like Xavier Worthy, who Tom Brady never has had in his arsenal as a Patriots quarterback. So never put those two names together and then think it's all of a sudden gonna be synonymous with each other. Let's keep a pause on that. The thing I want to mention though is this defense is playing like a Hall of Fame defense. This reminds me of the 2000 Ravens, honestly. It's not to that extent as an offense, but this defense is carrying them throughout the league. And it's amazing to see that kind of impact the defense can have. So that's my first team. Second team, as I agree with Yash here, is the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I think the thing that surprised me most is how Russell Wilson played. I didn't expect that out of Russell Wilson. That looked like a young Russell Wilson, full of energy and power. I'm not talking about the film and the right decisions, wrong decisions. I'm just talking about his energy, his impact, his overall presence on the field was felt. Like you could feel the Jets defense literally being like, "Uh-oh, like he's back. He's back." Like that's how you could feel it just by watching the highlights, which is quite insane. This defense is playing at an all-star level right now. probably the best defense in the NFL. I mean, the Chargers are number one in points allowed, but if you look at an overall defense, that defense is right now the number one defense. And this team could make the Super Bowl. I'm ready to put that down. This team could really make the Super Bowl. If you look at the way that defense is playing, they could well make the Super Bowl. That's my second team. The third team that I actually want to mention, interestingly enough, for look, I don't know if we want to say incorrect reasons or weird reasons, but I think you kind of have to mention this team when we're talking about like upper quality teams, and that's the Baltimore Ravens. The reason why I'm saying they shocked me was the first 2 weeks they looked disorganized, completely disorganized. Offense, defense. The past 4 weeks, you're seeing a level of offense the NFL has never seen. Never seen. You've seen the greatest show on turf. You've seen the Broncos with Peyton Manning. You've seen the 50 touchdown 2008 Patriots. You've seen those offenses. This is an offense the history of the NFL has never been able to quantify or ever see. When you can throw 5 touchdowns in a game, but also have over 200 rushing yards, that is incredible. This Buccaneers defense isn't just an average so-so defense. That is a dominant defense. When you look at Todd Bowles, he is a defensive genius. 41 points on a Todd Bowles defense is something you should note down because that is quite an incredible achievement. You look at Antoine Winfield, he looked like a subpar safety against Derrick Henry. The man was just running over people, and it wasn't like he had like 25 carries like he would have in Tennessee. He had 13 for 150 plus. Lamar Jackson's getting 65 off 7 carries, throwing 5 touchdowns, 280, has a quarterback rating over 100 against a Buccaneers defense at Tampa Bay. Like, those are things people have to start note taking right now. And I think we all know this. That Ravens game against the Chiefs was a fluke. Everybody knows that. Because right now, if I put the Chiefs and the Ravens up against each other, I'm taking the Ravens any day. Almost any day. Reason why this offense has figured itself out. Similar to the Chiefs, though, on one hand, this defense has been very, very average. I mean, you look at the way they're giving up yards. I think it was yards per catch. So I think I'm not sure if I'm saying the stat right, but I'm saying yards after the catch. Yards after the catch. It's
Yes, yes.
incredible. Last year, you could see the tackling from Mike McDonald's side as a defense coordinator just being spot on. They're giving up so many yards after the catch. Um, Run defense is also not great. The pass defense, like Baker Mayfield, was squaring them up. He's had a couple of bad throws, but he was squaring them up all day. That defense is very, very average to me, honestly. But it's not to the extent that there's a disparity within the Chiefs. So I'm saying from the Ravens standpoint, though, they have just been flat out balling over the past 3 weeks, and I'm yet to say there's one team to stop them. So those are my three teams. Now, Yash, if you don't mind, should I take the control on maybe the three trades that I think is going to be biggest?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, this one's might surprise you, honestly, but I kind of thought about this for a little while. I think the Chiefs should trade for Evan Ingram. The reason why I say that is this. Most people are saying the Chiefs need a go-to receiver. My point is they've never needed a go-to receiver. You look at two Super Bowls that they've got, they didn't need a go-to receiver. Neither did they need a extremely fast, great, for football 101 language, for very, very, very like easy language, zebras or, you know, an F or an H back on, a 5 out type of offense. You don't need those inside slot receivers. He didn't need it, and he still won them damn Super Bowls. Sick of it, but he won all of them, right? What he always needed was a guy who could catch the inside catches, the easy slots down in the center, and then take it for long. Rashid Rice is not a great deep runner. He's really not a great deep runner. The best thing that he is an inside, keep the ball down. I'm going to make the yards after the catch. West Coast classic offense. Evan Ingram's going to offer you that. He's going to be a great inside. He can block too. He can definitely block. At the same time, Travis Kelce's getting older. You're going to get a guy who's just as dependable at this current point in time, just as dependable, a guy who's a pretty decent route runner, a guy that we were thinking was going to be that additional point to this Jaguars offense until Doug Peterson messed the entire thing up. As long as with a bunch of problems with the Jaguars franchise, we don't even need to get into that. But Evan Ingram in himself is a very good tight end, very smart, I would say, on the field, makes a lot of great decisions, which is what the Kansas City Chiefs need right now. And he's a great guy after the catch. So I think that's one of the trades that the Kansas City Chiefs should make. It's not one on the radar, maybe, but I think that's a big, really important one. Second one I want to mention is for the Detroit Lions. Now, the Lions, obviously, first of all, heartbreaking news that Aiden Hutchinson has been injured. 6.5 sacks over the first 3 weeks is an incredible, astounding way to start off, a season, and then allow that to happen is just not allow that to happen. To have that happen is horrible, horrible. But the one thing I will say, and me being a fan of this team, a supporter of this team, is why I'm saying it. They should trade for Josh Uke from the New England Patriots. Now, this may not strike many people initially, and Yash is already smiling, so I
I
know
like
he
that
likes
too.
this. He didn't think about it. I know he didn't think about it
I didn't
either.
think about it, but I like that
But
move.
the reason why I said that is this. Both of them very, very similar build. Big, bulky guys who are very strong off the ball, maybe not the quickest, but they get their hands on the tackle extremely quick, very agile football players, great overall hand technique. The thing that Aiden Hutchinson just does miles better than Josh Uke is motor. He has this motor that just keeps on going. Uke runs out. That's the problem with Uke. He kind of runs out come three-fourths of the game, and that last fourth of the game is where you need him the most. Uke is extremely good though. Like I remember him when he got drafted from when I think it was 2019 when he got drafted by Bill
2020.
Belichick. 2020 or
Yep.
21?
2020.
I think it was 2020. Okay. When he got drafted by that team, I told Yash back then itself, and I was not very knowledgeable in the NFL. He's going to be a monster because he was so good off the edge. He had so much power and energy going to every single time. This guy's going to wreak havoc, and he has been. He really has been. When we look at the amount of pressure that he's giving in all the time when he's snapping, it's quite incredible. Actually, there's one stat I can't believe I'm saying this because I hate stats, but there's one stat that goes into the level to which you can actually go the defensive lineman, the amount of space they have between the quarterback and the defensive lineman every single time they throw the ball. That's another way of essentially measuring pressure rate if you think about it like that.
It's just
But
more like how like the quality of pressure on a given day.
exactly, right? This guy has nearly 70% over his career, which is incredible from that standpoint. And he's been able to do it on a consistent basis. He's a very similar build type also for that Detroit Lions defense. Tough, physical, big, nasty. That's Josh Uke. I think this will be the breakout deal, personally. Out of all trade deadlines that could happen, this will be the breakout deal, I feel, for this franchise specifically. Because this franchise could well and well, and I know it's in my books, well and well win the Super Bowl. Sorry, Yash, I know you want to talk. I'll
No,
finish
no,
up quick on
absolutely.
this last one.
Yeah.
The last one, I really didn't know much. I thought these two were the biggest ones for me. The last one I really didn't have much idea on, but kind of thinking about it, the only reason why I kind of leaned on this side was again kind of thinking about the Pittsburgh Steelers, the receiving room. When you mentioned the receiving room, one thing I did think about actually was going with Kendrick Bourne from the New England Patriots as well. Now, this one may not strike people. Wait, no, not Kendrick Bourne. My bad, my bad. Mike Williams is the one I wanted to mention. My bad, not Kendrick Bourne. Mike Williams for me, I thought actually when we released him, when we as in the Chargers released Mike Williams, I was upset. But considering the type of offense that actually, you know what, I don't even know what type of offense we want to run. First couple of weeks, we run the ball every single play. All of a sudden, now we want to let Justin Herbert throw for 373 yards and not get a touchdown. It's Chargers confuse me with. Okay, but when it comes to Mike Williams, I think the Steelers going to benefit off of him. Why? He's a big receiver. That's a thing that they've been lacking for a long time. They need that kind of almost Calvin Johnson type of effect in that sense that this is a big guy. is a big guy on the field. We need to get two on him so that he doesn't make them, acrobatic catches, right? His version on the Jets is not true Mike Williams. I feel under the right coaching, like Mike Tomlin, with a guy like Russell Wilson who likes those big receivers. We saw that with DK Metcalf. We saw that before in his career. We can see that now with Mike Williams. He has good hands, very good deep lateral outs, lacks in speed, but at the same time he can make up for it with his amazing ability to catch deep balls and overall just his pretty good presence on the field. I think that's what they lack right now. They're running the football all in good, but they need a guy who's going to be a deep threat. George Pickens is not cannot be the only receiver you target, right? You have Freinmuth, who's a good tight end. He's proved that last week, but you need a deep threat, some guy who's just going to confuse you. MVS was that guy for the Kansas City Chiefs. You know what I'm saying? Like he wasn't the best by any means, but he was that guy. So Mike Williams is going to be that guy who's going to transition that offense to a top 10 offense. I think these are the three deadlines that should happen by the trade. And I will shut up for the next how many ever minutes you need, Yash, because I
I
apologize
honestly,
for
so
that
you
rant.
kind of surprised me with the Mike Williams one, not because of the trade itself, but actually, I had Mike Williams going to a different team for a
Mm,
specific reason that actually came out, I think today or yesterday. I'm not, I'll be honest, guys. I've had a long last couple of days. I have,
yeah.
I've had a really chaotic, hectic week. So, um, I'm not good with time right with my sense of time right now. But Mike Williams was on my list for one specific reason. Jameson Williams got suspended 2 games for violating the PED policy of the NFL.
Oh,
And
I
because of
didn't know
that,
this. Okay.
yeah, this is very new news. I think it happened either last night I saw it or this morning. Again, I don't remember, but for the same reasons
12
you
hours ago.
mentioned, Mike Williams is a very much big, big time threat down the field. In a way, he's also a very similar route runner to a receiver that was very critical for the Lions last year, Josh Reynolds,
Good
being
point.
that guy who's a very much possession receiver, but also has that deep threat versatility. I think he can fill in for a guy like Jameson Williams, who's not as consistent staying on the field, whether it's injuries or whether it's suspensions. And then in the meet, when Jameson Williams comes back, he can be that third receiver that I think the Lions would definitely need come playoff time. As far as the edge rusher when it comes to the Lions, I think that's tough because at the end of the day, I mean, I like the Josh Uche pick. I'll mention on this. Josh Uche has been one of the top 10 pass rushers in the league, just according to the stat of pressures. For those of you who don't know what pressures is, Akhilesh kind of went over this earlier on, but pressures are basically either when you hit the quarterback, cause the quarterback to move out of the pocket, which is basically the surrounding area of the offensive line, or sack the quarterback. And Josh Uche actually had more pressures from 2021 to 23 than his teammate Matthew Judon, who, if I'm not mistaken, was twice a Pro Bowler in his 3 years with the Patriots. So that kind of speaks on how impressive he's been. I'm not I'm a little bit skeptical on the fit of the Lions. I think they can make it work because they have some defensive versatility. But
Mm,
again, with a guy like losing Aiden Hutchinson, it's just a big loss. And I just don't think anybody that they're going to fill with that role is going to be enough, just one guy. I
sure.
feel like they're going to end up trading for more than one guy. So for that reason, I don't think it's going to be someone like Uche. I think it's going to be multiple smaller, lesser known defensive ends that we're probably not going to be talking about. On the
Okay.
topic of defensive ends, though, you got me thinking with the Uche pick. Originally, I was going to mention a trade that I don't think that was going to happen, but intrigued me, and that was going to be Garrett Wilson to the Baltimore Ravens. Garrett Wilson to the
Huh.
Baltimore Ravens, I feel number one, he's extremely cheap being still on that rookie deal. Two, he's a route runner that I think very well fits in the Ravens scheme. He's decent enough of a blocker that I think he would open up the field a little bit for Lamar Jackson. He's not always having to rely on that slot threat with Zay Flowers,
Hmm.
Rashad Bateman on the outside. I think he provides a little bit more versatility for Lamar Jackson, but I don't think that's going to happen as such. So instead, I'm actually going to prioritize another position I think the Ravens desperately need, are going to need in the playoffs if they want to beat the Chiefs. and that is edge. I think that they've done a pretty good job as far as the edge rusher, but they had a hard time being able to keep Mahomes within the pocket, especially after Kyle Van Noy got hurt in that game. I think that they could be the team to go after Josh Uche. They like
Mm,
those very versatile
okay.
defensive ends who can drop back and cover
I
every
agree.
now and then. He reminds me a little bit of a guy like Tyus Bowser, if you remember him for a while.
Yeah,
Calvin Noy really plays that same role for Baltimore, and I think he has that same athleticism that they like seeing out of guys like Odafe Owe and a Matthew Judon and a Suggs in the past. So for that
okay,
reason, I honestly think he's a perfect rental for Baltimore in their contention to get to the Super Bowl this year. I have the Baltimore Ravens going for Josh
sure.
Uche. And then on the topic of defense ends again, I'm actually going to go on a limb and say that Zadarius Smith gets traded to the Washington Commanders. It's a team that gave up both their star edge rushers last year and now find themselves ahead of schedule when it comes to getting to the playoffs. Who's the best edge rusher on the market right now? Probably
Yeah,
Darius
saving
Smith as
Clowney.
far as just name brand. And he's been very, very good so far, but he comes at a low price, about 11.5 million, which I think the Commanders would be able to take on a rookie
Yeah,
rental and see where that ends up. He's a veteran presence for a very lackluster edge rushing group.
yeah,
I think that given how much pressure he creates on a given down, I think he fits very well in a Dan Quinn's scheme. I think he's perfect for Washington to be able to contend for the playoffs or maybe even go further, like I said.
sure. Yeah, I like your picks honestly more than mine. Especially the Zadarius Smith one, I definitely agree. Especially the with Adam Gase. I mean, I want to mention him because from a GM standpoint,
Adam
when
Gase.
he
Hold up. Adam
no
Gase.
what's his name? What's his
Adam
name?
Peters.
Peters. Okay, I got the Adam part right.
Adam Gase.
Yeah,
Nah, we don't want
Adam
Adam
Peters.
Gase near an NFL organization in the meantime.
The Adam Peters. No. The reason why it's some Adam. Okay, who cares? The Adam Peters. My apologies, Mr. Peters. I was actually when he was hired by the Washington Commanders, I was a huge fan because when you look at his overall pedigree, he has three Super Bowl championships already as an assistant. Um, he's been a guy who's been part of the NFL for a long time. And he's also had quite a lot of impacts wherever he's been, and people have liked him. So in that, and you look at the amount of trades that he made during that draft, and the amount of talent he like acquired, like you could mention that was one of the top five drafts of this year. So
100%.
he definitely could get something like this to happen.
The next thing we're going to get into in this episode, and this is for me very, very fun being an analytics geek and very much invested in the business side of sports. The next part we're going to basically be talking about is sports administration. Um, sorry, give me one sec. Yeah, all right. Sports and sports business and basically the economics of the sport, salary cap, free agency, the draft, how that works, prioritization of certain positions, which I think is very unique in terms of the NFL. Um, as my phone for some reason is acting up really, really weird. I do not know why, but give me one sec. Uh, why the hell is it? For some reason, my phone
Just
is
go,
so.
just going off that the kind of that point. This is also going to be something new for me. I am a zero when it comes to the football business side of it. Although I might argue that currently I can make better decisions than Jerry Jones, but that's a different topic for a different day. Um, I don't know if
We
any of you guys
certainly
heard
can
of.
make better decisions than him on the radio. That
I
we
mean,
can.
yeah, we can do that, but at the same time, I think we can also say that we won't say publicly that we don't want to get Derrick Henry because he won't fit our system. Let me mention something to the general public who is very knowledgeable people, to say the least. I would change my system if I get a guy like Derrick Henry. Why would I want to keep the same system if I get a guy like Derrick Henry? Why can I not just run the ball?
And that's
Right?
what we're going to get into exactly when it comes to this episode, as far as prioritization of positions. Obviously, there are very much exceptions to the rules,
Yeah.
and that's one of the best things about this sport. There's so many
I see,
different rules.
Yash. I have one question, and this is right along the lines
Absolutely.
of Jerry Jones. One thing he mentioned in that briefly, and I don't understand this, so I'm going to say it as I remember. He said there was a cap issue. What does he mean? Is that true? First of all, is there a cap issue? What does cap kind of mean, right, in the NFL? And then if you could kind of just go through that, kind of like a notes session, just I kind of
Absolutely.
want to,
So let's put this in a lecture base. When
yeah,
it comes to
exactly.
this. So I'm going to share my screen um, to my notes section. I feel like I'm a college professor right now.
Yeah.
I feel like my communications professor, Mr. Odell, if you're watching this, we had some great conversations, and I'm gonna need a letter of recommendation at some point. So
First of all, Professor Odell, why would you allow him to call you Mr. Odell? You're a professor, man. Gotta stick
I
it
call him
up.
Professor Odell. I call him
You
that in
just
person.
said Mr. Odell to the American public.
Akilesh, it's not letting me share.
It's not letting you share. Okay. Um, while we take up some time for Zoom practices, it should
Technical
work now.
difficulties, please stand by
Technical difficulties, exactly. It should work now.
as I will try to. Yeah, there we go.
Okay, perfect.
Perfect. So, all right. So, what we're going to call this is sports economics. If there are any
Wow.
eight-year
No,
eight-year kids who are watching this,
this.
please take notes diligently because this is your first class. No, I'm kidding. Um, but what we're going to start off with, obviously, is talking about what Akhilesh mentioned, which is the salary cap. Now, there are differences in this in different sports depending on kind of how the sport is structured. Number one, we have when it comes to salary cap in general, we have to talk about just big markets versus small market teams. That this is very much not a this is very much very present in other sports. We look at the NBA, the teams that are always getting free agents. The Golden State Warriors, 76ers, the Knicks, the Lakers, the Celtics. Not only are they located in some of the largest cities in the country, but they're usually these legacy type teams that build brands over decades of previous success, which kind of which kind of discourages parity. In baseball, that's even more the case, where you have
Okay.
a team like the Yankees or the Dodgers that just spend and spend billions of dollars. Dodgers spent $2.2 billion in player salaries
Joey.
last offseason. And in soccer, even more the case, whether there's a variety of publicly funded versus privately funded organizations. The best examples are the case when it comes to oil money that has been a scandal with Manchester City, breaking what the soccer league federation in Europe called the UEFA, breaking their rules called financial fair play rules, which basically is the limit on how much you can spend, the threshold. Baseball has something similar, but usually in the case of teams not having a salary cap, teams are very much easily able to find loopholes and just kind of manipulate the system. In a case of the NBA, the NBA has a salary cap, but like I said, because of marketing as such, the league is structured in a way where teams are able to get more money from their owner, and as a result be able to still invest in their organization more if you're in a big market team. That's something that an owner with deep pockets like a Steve Ballmer is able to do for a team like the Clippers. We're not
Mhm.
nearly as successful as the Lakers, but they're still in a big market. Now in the
Sure.
NFL, that is completely not the case for a specific reason. And before I say this, I want to make it very clear. There's nothing here that has to do with the political connotation of communism and capitalism. I've heard people criticize the hell out of this. I want to make it clear neither me or Akhilesh insinuates anything involving communism. We don't support it. We, I'm not confirming or denying my beliefs economically. Um, this has nothing to do with that, but it's a term used in sports a lot that the commissioner during the 60s when the NFL and the AFL merged used sports socialism to be able to create a balance in the teams. And what does that exactly mean? In the NFL, if anybody's ever realized, teams are largely controlled by the owners. And the owners have more power in the NFL, you can argue, than in any other league. Soccer, it's very much manager oriented, player oriented. Basketball, it's certainly player oriented. Baseball is very much market oriented. In football,
Hmm.
it's very much owner oriented.
Owner.
In the NFL, majority of owners are around the same wealth compared to other leagues. Now, that's not that's not a general rule here. And the reason
Sure.
why I mentioned that it's not a general rule is because of the salary cap. The salary cap, in definition, provides teams only provides NFL teams only a certain amount of money that they can spend on a given year. And that,
So is that contingent on anything?
yes, that is contingent on quite a few things, actually. Um, First off, the probably the biggest contingency is how much player salary you already have. So, for instance, a team like the Kansas City Chiefs, the Baltimore Ravens, the New Orleans Saints, the Los Angeles Rams, the San Francisco 49ers, teams that have accumulated large amounts of talent at different positions as a result of the large amount of money that is invested in their overall team due to trying to sustain that team for long periods of time. As a result, that leaves them less cap space come 2025, 26, whenever the contracts are still, whenever their players are still under contract to not be able to spend as much in the NFL. Okay. The
Sure.
second thing it is very much dependent on is TV revenue. And not just TV revenue, just overall revenue that the NFL makes. So this is especially big in the case of something of a global events that happens, such as COVID, which obviously decreased the amount of direct viewership and attendance in the NFL because no one was coming to games for obvious reasons. As a result, the salary cap of the NFL dropped 25 million that year. As a result, teams
Hmm.
were spending less and less money. Actually, the teams that were spending the most amount of money were teams like the Miami Dolphins, teams like the New England Patriots. These were teams that were very much basically bare naked as far as their salary cap the year prior, where they pretty much were rebuilding, scraped to the bone, and then they just were able to collect a large amount of, mid-market players, so to say, who weren't exactly the highest paid at their position. The Miami Dolphins got guys like Ryan Fitzpatrick, Emmanuel Ogba, Byron Jones in 2020. The Patriots got the likes of Matthew Judon. I don't know. Give me some names here. You're the Patriots fan. Um,
Uh,
Kendrick
they
Bourne
had
was another one. I don't know. Hunter
I
Henry,
don't know.
Jonnu Smith, another
Hunter
one.
Henry, John Smith. Yes, there
Yes.
we go.
So, I mean, that for that reason, you saw in 2019 or in 2020 and 2021, a lot of these teams that were either very mediocre and were rebuilding or getting a new quarterback very much get to the playoffs more easily. And the same thing could be said with a team like the Bengals. The same thing could be said with a lot of these teams. Whereas now it's very much these teams that are very much built through the NFL draft. And that's big in the NFL more than in other teams. Now, the NFL draft is our second key term. And the reason why I mentioned the NFL draft is different from other drafts. Unlike the MLB and the NHL, and really even soccer, but mostly the MLB and the NHL, drafts players who are drafted immediately. And unlike the
Going.
NBA, there are
Really?
7 rounds, not 2.
You think they immediately play?
Say it again.
You think they immediately play these players?
In the NFL, majority of them do compared to the MLB and the NHL. In the
Okay.
NHL, you probably have three or four players that end up playing in the major leagues in the rookie season.
But
Unless
you
you're
would
a
rest them
generational
and
talent
wait before they
like
come
Sidney
on.
Crosby or Connor McDavid, you're not going to see an NHL player play immediately day one. MLB,
So you want development,
exactly.
essentially.
I mean, I can only think of one MLB player who played. I mean,
How about that LSU guy?
Paul Skeens. No, he took a year and a half.
The
Pitcher,
Padres, San
the
Diego
pitchers.
Padres,
No, he's for the Pirates.
Pirates. My bad. Well,
Yeah.
I don't know MLB, but
But yeah,
clearly.
he took a year and a half even then before he got.
Oh, so that's the same story with guys like Aaron Judge, Shohei. I mean, Shohei
Aaron
might be
Judge took
different.
8 years before he got to the majors.
Whoa, okay.
Yeah, because he went through college and then he took 5 years in the minors. Shohei Ohtani came straight from Japan, so he was already a major league player technically. It would be basically
Oh,
like a European
okay. He was an
basketball player.
international player that just kind of came into the sport.
Exactly.
Okay,
In the
okay.
NFL, you're probably going to get majority of first round picks, quite a few second round picks that are going to end up having some sort of playing time, if not starting in the rookie season. And then you got, breakout fifth round, sixth round picks, whatever, right?
Yeah.
So that's one thing that the NFL is very much focused on, the young players, the development, and for right reasons. I mean, the NFL, the shelf life of an NFL player is shorter than it is in any other league. Contracts are much shorter, being 4 years compared to an NBA's 5, 6 year deals versus a hockey's standard max contracts being 8 years. MLB, if you're a star player, you can get a 20-year contract. Even in soccer, I mean, Messi got, what was it, a ridiculous like 9 year deal, right?
Yeah.
So in the NFL, it's very much you get those 4 or 5 years with the rookie player, and that guy's got to be good right away. If he's not, coaches, GMs are going to be fired. That player is probably not going to get a second shot starting, and if he
Yeah.
does, he's going to be on a very short leash. Because of these two things, as a result, the salary cap is very, as a result, because of that, the NFL salary cap, teams are very much dependent on 1 or 2 years of success. As a result,
Hmm.
when it comes to certain positions, you pay them a lot differently. Now, let's just go through the overall positions. That we got your quarterback, we got your running back, we got your wide receivers, tight ends, offensive line. I'll divide that: tackle, guard, tackle, interior O line. Let's go edge, interior D line, linebacker, cornerback,
Defensive cornerbacks, safeties.
and then we'll get
Yeah.
to punter and kicker for
Punter
the
and
time.
kickers.
Yeah, but all right. So there's a big difference, right? Based on what position you play, obviously you're going to take more or less hits in the NFL. The
Hmm.
biggest, the position that usually takes the most hits, and as a result, there's a trend for not wanting to pay these players at the position, is the running back, right? Very rare do you get a running back who actually gets paid by the same team that drafts him a second contract that is long term, right? You got
Hmm.
it more in the early 2020s because the 2017 draft specifically was very deep with running backs. So you got guys
Hmm.
like Joe Mixon, Dalvin Cook, Alvin Kamara, Christian McCaffrey. Let me ask you this though: how many of those players stayed and played out their entire second contracts with those teams?
I
Christian
don't think any.
McCaffrey got traded. Granted,
Yeah.
he was very good, but he had injury concerns before that. Dalvin
Mixon?
got, yes, 2020 and 2021, he was on that second contract. Then
Oh,
he
okay, he did. Okay.
2022. You got Dalvin Cook, who got cut halfway through his contract. Alvin Kamara didn't get cut, but he had some injury issues the last 2 years.
Sure.
Leonard Fournette didn't even get to his second contract before he got cut by the Jags. Who else is Joe Mixon? He got
Hmm.
traded halfway through his contract to the Houston Texans from the Cincinnati Bengals. And then there's several other running backs who go through injuries, guys like Marlon Mack, Dante Foreman, etc. Right? So what my point is for the running backs is usually most of these running backs don't even get really drafted in the first round of the draft, because when you
Hmm.
get draft a player in the first round, your attempt is to say that guy is a franchise player. And a franchise player usually not only gets a second contract, but generally if they're playing that long enough, they get enough of the third contract. They might not necessarily play out the third contract like an AJ Green or Julio Jones, but they at least
Sure.
get that third contract. A running back
Hmm.
generally doesn't for that
Okay.
season. And if they do, they just don't get paid that much. So running back's shelf life is about 5 years, right?
Okay.
Whereas you compare a quarterback, usually quarterbacks end up playing
Lifelong.
15, 20 years, right? So they end up, and being that quarterbacks are widely considered the most important position in the NFL for a variety of reasons, whether it's calling plays, being really the catalyst of that offense with decision making and whatnot, they're the ones who end up making a lot more money. They have a 15-year shelf life, and they usually, in this day and age, they get paid somewhere from 40 to $50 million on average. A guy like Daniel Jones, who's not really widely regarded as a quarterback, ended up getting 40 million a year. So that kind of says enough for that,
Sure.
right? Then you go to a wide receiver position. And to me, this is probably one of the more intriguing positions in the league. A wide receiver, as we've seen, a lot of wide receiver players end up, their contracts end up really getting delayed out. Part of
Hmm.
it is just due to really strong negotiating tactics. Majority of wide receivers agents are Drew Rosenhaus, who is
Hmm.
basically, he is the worst enemy of any NFL GM, right? Um, and yeah, hey, that's a good thing for his clients. Obviously, they get a lot of,
Sure.
but um, for that same reason, a lot of wide receivers end up really playing out that first 5 years if they're a first round pick, or in the case of a Debo Samuel or a DK Metcalf, 4 years. They end up getting that second contract, but generally either end up getting cut before that final year if they have a shorter shelf life, or they end up playing out that contract and then end up getting either franchise tagged and traded, or basically just sign with another team in free agency, like a DeAndre Hopkins did after
Okay.
his Arizona contract finished. In the case of the wide receiver, one general rule that is usually spoken, especially in this day and age, is wide receivers after the age of 30 are usually expendable. So I'll say that again.
Hmm.
Wide receivers after the age of 30 are usually expendable. This is why someone like Devontae Adams hits their hits their prime around 28, 29. They get that
Sure.
contract that guarantees them 5 years. All right, now play 2, 3 years, get traded. As we saw, Devontae Adams really didn't even get traded for that much, considering how well sought after he is for receivers.
Yes. Right.
We've seen that with other receivers, guys like Julio Jones, AJ Green,
DeAndre Hopkins.
DeAndre Hopkins flame out by the time they get to 30. And even if they're playing well, they're not playing nearly the same
That.
level that they were in their prime. Tight ends are probably the more intriguing position. Now, to me, tight ends are one of the more undervalued positions in the NFL. This is a position that really, really, especially in
It's
the
that last piece in the puzzle.
absolutely, and it determines in the modern day in the NFL with passing is more prevalent and whatnot. It determines what it determines winning really at the end of the day. We see
Sure.
the last two great dynasties, they both had amazing tight ends in Rob Gronkowski and Travis
Travis
Kelce,
Kelce.
right? Both when their quarterbacks really started picking up the pace when it came to passing numbers and whatnot, right? And what have you. And even before that, you could mention some of the greatest blocking tight ends ever. You could get the Dallas Cowboys, and I forget the name of the tight end they had.
Ooh. Jason Witten.
No, 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 no. In the 90s. I'll tell you his name.
90s.
Yes,
Oh.
1995 Cowboys. I always forget because they also had an H back next to Emmett Smith. Uh,
Hmm.
so I always get those two players confused. I want to just make sure. Yes, Jay Novacek, right? Jay
Ah,
Novacek,
okay.
very, very good
Wow.
blocker.
Yeah.
You can mention him. So to me, the tight ends are very much a position that is definitely growing in the league as far as their receiving capabilities, as far as their blocking capabilities. And to me, I think they should be paid more. You see a lot of tight ends, especially a guy like Kelce, breaking numbers well into his early 30s. To me, this is a position that needs to get paid more. But for them, they usually have around an 8 to 10 year shelf life, right?
Hmm.
Again, that's usually because just the depth of the position hasn't necessarily been that expansive. in the history of the NFL. It's growing now, so we'll see what happens, but it's a relatively new position as in terms of how much success it's had historically. So that's kind of interesting. Now, the offensive line, these are the guys that benefit off of contracts the most, I would say, especially when it comes to money, it's the tackles. When it comes to second contract being guaranteed, the interior offensive line any day. Interior offensive line are the first guys you will always see get contracts because chances are they're not drafted in the first round, but I guarantee you every team who wins the Super Bowl is going to tell you that there's one guard or one center or something like that that was
Hmm.
valuable to the team. Chiefs is Creed Humphrey. We saw how quickly he got a deal this offseason when he was up for an extension.
Right.
Patriots for a long time was well, they didn't really sign Shaq Mason or Joe Tooney to extensions.
Sure.
But before
Yeah.
that, you had I think what was his name? Dan Coppin. You had um, you know,
Nate Soldier.
no, Nate Soldier was a tackle. But you had Dan Coppin, who was the guard that they had for a while in 2007. I'm sorry, again, I'm blanking on names right now, but I will tell you the name.
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
Logan Mankins. Yes, there we go. Right? This was a guy who actually got drafted in the first round, and within 3 years, Belichick was quick to basically start negotiations. There was a bit of a stalling as far as how much money Mankins wanted, but they eventually got that deal done a lot quicker, actually, than some of the deals that he got done with wide receivers. As you can
Mm,
see, offensive lines are very much valuable to a team when it comes to the Super Bowl positions. When it comes to tackles, there's a difference between the left and right side tackle, usually depending on what hand the quarterback throws with, which is generally the right hand. So as a result, the left tackle gets paid a lot of money. We see that with guys like Tristan Wirfs, Laramie Tunsil, Jordan Mailata, Christian Darrisaw, etc. Right? So tackles always get the advantage of big money. As far as the defensive position, there are three positions in this day and age that get paid a lot. The edge, the interior D line, and cornerback. Interior D lineman is rare. You got for that position, you got to have a guy like Aaron Donald, Chris Jones. You just
mm,
got it. Now, granted, those guys have contributed to winning in the modern day, especially with how the passing game has evolved over time a lot more than in the past, because these guys are exceptional pass rushers as well as they are great run defenders. Aaron Donald was putting up 20, 25 tackles per loss in his prime. He was also putting up 20 sacks. That says enough,
mm.
right?
Wow. Yeah, right.
There's a reason this man got paid $30 million 5 years before Chris Jones did. Okay, $30 million a year. He's one of the best defensive players ever. There's a reason why the Rams knew that they couldn't just rely on him and just having a bunch of lesser valuable run stuffers around him, and they could still win a Super Bowl. He was that entire front seven to a degree, and for that reason, that's why he got paid a lot. Now, in a team like the Patriots, where they never had an elite interior D line presence, they had Vince Wilfork, who was an elite nose tackle.
Yeah,
We know how limited nose tackles are. He still got paid a lot. That to
sure.
a lot of teams makes the difference as far as their run defense, and as a result, those guys get paid handsomely. Usually get overpaid for their price. That's what I will say.
Mm,
Your deal.
okay.
Usually get overpaid, but it's worth it. It's always worth the money um, to overpay a defensive line. Um, in the case of teams like the Seattle Seahawks, um, we look at certain teams that had insane opportunities to potentially build dynasties. The Seattle Seahawks. We could look at the Pittsburgh Steelers in the late 2010s, or sorry, in the late 2000s, excuse me.
Great. Yeah.
We can look at the Baltimore Ravens when they won in 2012, right? We can look at the Philadelphia Eagles. These were teams that had amazing defensive tackles for a span. The Seahawks had Brandon McBain, Michael Bennett inside. Michael Bennett was more of an edge rusher, but he could play that verse.
Sure, but still, he could do damage on the inside.
Right.
Yeah.
Eagles, Fletcher Cox was one of the best interior D line presence in the game. At the time, the Steelers were winning a lot. They had Brett Kiesel in the inside, and who's the other team I mentioned? The Ravens. They had Haloti Ngata. Now, Haloti Ngata was very, very much limited in how he played after 2013 due to injuries, etc. As a result, the Baltimore Ravens never got there. The 49ers, same thing we can add with a guy like Justin Smith. We saw what happened when he tore his triceps. Aldon Smith went from a guy who nearly broke the sack record and not having a single sack in the last 4 games.
Yeah,
Steelers, Brett Kiesel retired. They had an immediate hole to fill. And it took 4 or 5 years before Cam Hayward became the Cam Hayward we now
yeah.
today. So it took a while for that Steelers defense to pick up in the same way. And likewise with the other teams I mentioned, Fletcher Cox
That's
had a
a
couple of good
very
years and then
that's a
fell off.
very underrated name, Brett Heasel. He was amazing on the interior presence. You talk about this 2008, like everybody mentions James Harrison, Ryan Clark hits, Troy Polamalu, like all those guys. Like people forget that Kiesel was that guy on that inside. He was the key to make that Pittsburgh train sizzle. You know what I'm saying? Like he was incredible.
Right. Absolutely. And the thing with Kiesel is people really underestimate how good of a pass rusher was. He never got that many sacks, but he constantly generated pressure. He was always in the right place in the right time. You look at those hard hits that James Harrison did, Ryan Clark did, Troy Polamalu did. I guarantee you, if they were close to the box or within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage, Kiesel was always the next person to hit. He was always the next person to hit. So, Kiesel put respect on his
And
name.
he got double teamed all the time, double, triple team.
100%.
That no, when they talk about the stretch play in football, Bill Belichick had that. The idea of the stretch play was to put the guard and then the guard and then the left guard, right guard, or nose guard, right, to get to that nose tackle. They would bring in two guards and a center. They would sometimes literally be like, I don't care, my running back can get hit by Troll Polamalu. I just don't want to get Kiesel. That speaks incredibly of the kind of effect that he had in the league. I'll
100%.
let you carry on.
When it comes, I mean, and that's the thing. An interior D lineman always generates pressure for the edge rushers. So in a lot of cases, if you have one of those elite guys, you pay him a lot of money, that will help your edge rushers. A lot of teams vary in what type of edge rushers they try to get. Baltimore and New England will go after these athletic, versatile guys who can kind of play different positions. That really depends on your scheme. But usually there's one edge rusher that you want to pay every time. If you're one of these top teams, you either have one of the interior D-line presence. Usually, if that's the case, you're a 3-4 defense. And if you're a
Mhm.
4-3 defense, a la the Detroit Lions, the 49ers, and even teams that don't have even the teams who are not elite, who have great defenses or not even great defenses, but really get carried by the
Decent
pass rush.
defenses.
Yeah, even they just get carried by the pass rushers. Look at Max Crosby, Myles Garrett. There's a reason why they're getting paid 25, $26 million a year, because they do the same thing on that edge rusher presence. But that's usually there for 4-3. To kind of make this more clear for people, 4-3 is usually more run defense oriented. As a result, the interior D linemen are more focused on stopping the run. So the pass rushers are the ones who generate the pressure. More
Right.
attention goes to that, especially now in this day and age, because of the fact that this is a passing league.
3-4 defense is kind of more the opposite. Nose tackle is the one that's trying to get the pressure on the quarterback that eases off of those edge rushers or blitzes. A lot of the times, especially when you look at the NFL today, I think the Pittsburgh Steelers, they've somehow been able to dominate over 50 years using the same defensive scheme. And their idea is to allow the nose tackle and inside D tackles to enforce the pressure when the quarterback to get him outside of the pocket so that the edge rushers can get those sacks. That's why I look at guys like James Harrison, TJ Watt, a lot of outside Kevin Green back in the Cowher days. Those type of outside linebackers, guys are able to get that many sacks because that inside pressure just generates so much. These guys have to leave the pocket.
100%. And then, I mean, the same thing could be said that same thing trickles down. If anyone's ever heard the term trickle down economics, again, I'm not trying to get political here. I've been using a lot of political terms, but there's something called trickle down in economics in the NFL too. It's called interior D lineman, edge rusher, cornerback. Each help each other get money, and
Yeah,
for good reason. Cornerbacks are the ones who end up um, getting who end up making life easier for the interior D line, the edge rushers to be able to get more pressure, take more time to get their pressure against better O linemen, and vice versa. It's a very symbiotic relationship. To get a lot of pressure easily usually means that cornerbacks are able to do their job and lock down the receivers, which gives them better numbers, vice versa. You see this where like a team like the Cincinnati Bengals,
Mm,
they'll very much focus on, or the 49ers, they'll very much focus on prioritizing their pass rush. As a result, they'll go for cornerbacks who just are good at one or two things, man
great
coverage,
point.
that type of
Great
stuff.
point.
Chargers are also very good at this. Um, and as a result, they don't have to nearly pay their cornerbacks as much. There's some other teams like a Denver Broncos when they had the no-fly zone, the Kansas City Chiefs, although the Chiefs kind of are interesting that way because they still pay their pass rushers more.
Sure.
But their secondary is always good. The Patriots did this. There are a few other teams I can't think off the top of my head, but were very much oriented on their secondary. I think the best example to provide, however, is the Jacksonville Jaguars in 2017, what they called Saxonville, a team
Mm,
that so comically collapsed because their cornerbacks were pissed off at the pass rushers because they felt that they were getting
they
too
should get
much
credit.
credit and vice versa. And both of them were having beef against each other's units, even though they were doing their jobs, which to me, I mean, that ended up screwing over the team.
Childish.
Jalen Ramsey was not asking for more money. Yannick Ngakoue was asking for more money. And then at the end of the day, no one got money on the Jags. Everyone
It's
got,
childish.
yeah. I mean, the story of the
No,
Jacksonville
no,
Jaguars franchise, to be honest. But um, I mean, it goes to show you kind of though, just kind of where the passing league is, being those three positions are the highest paid positions in the league. And then the linebackers, unless you have a Fred Warner, Demario Davis, this is very straight cut. Unless you have a Fred Warner, Demario Davis, one of the best linebackers in the league, who's really a do-it-all linebacker, you usually don't pay linebackers that much. You pay them somewhere close to $10 to $12 million if they're pretty good. If they're not, you're just gonna
you know.
yeah, you're just gonna go for these platoon type players at the linebacker position. Same thing could really be said about safeties, although with what we discussed in the last episode, if you haven't watched it, please go ahead and watch it, as far as how the run game is starting to become more and more common. As a result, with two high safeties, a lot of good teams are prioritizing very versatile safeties. We see what the Buccaneers do with Antonio
Mm,
Garcia, the Chargers do with Derwin James, the Ravens do with Kyle Hamilton, um, so on and so forth. As a result, safeties are being prioritized and paid a lot more in this
yeah.
day and age by teams. At the end of the day, what does this mean for overall every position? It depends on the team you are, what scheme you have offensively and defensively. Are you a 4-3 team? Are you a pass rush heavy team? Whatnot, right? As Akhilesh mentioned earlier, when we started this segment, was really also depends on the players you got.
Yeah.
Your team that is a run heavy scheme, you might prioritize both the pass and the running game because you have Derrick Henry on your team, who's the best running back in the league, and Lamar
Sure.
Jackson, who's the front runner in the MVP race right now, right, for the quarterback position. You're going to pay both very handsomely. And in the case of Derrick Henry, he's a little bit older. The Ravens got great value for the buck for Derrick Henry, paying him only $8 million a year for that. That's really based on what I said about the 5-6 year shelf life. Derrick Henry has pushed that out of the park, being a 31-year-old running back, if I'm not mistaken. And
Yeah, I think
he's
so.
still leading the league in rushing. Unbelievable.
Not just that, leading the league in rushing and on the verge of breaking Barry Sanders' record. He only got top 2000 once. Not Barry Sanders, my bad. Eric Dickerson's record.
But I mean, but that's the thing. Like with Derrick Henry, he's the rare exception of the rule when it
Yeah.
comes to running backs. Quarterbacks being prioritized a lot more. Now you're seeing a lot more talented quarterbacks as such. There are a lot of quarterbacks, some undeservingly, were getting paid a lot more than they should. But as a result, the quarterback position is high demand. At the end of the day, there are only 32 quarterbacks too. How many quarterbacks are elite who can really transcend a team or even just kind of give their team a couple more wins? That's why quarterbacks end up getting paid a lot more. With, when you look at receivers as such, there are teams like the Packers who might never draft a receiver in the first
Yeah.
round, but
Yeah.
they're always going to get great value in the second, third round. The big thing I would say with the Packers that I've always had a problem with is because they draft receivers second, third, fourth round, they are never ever able to. They always get screwed over when it comes to that second contract by the Packers. Unless you have
Yeah,
a guy like Devontae Adams who slowly emerges and then breaks out and then becomes what he is 5, 6 years down the line, then
which
usually
is
it does
very
happen.
rare.
We saw what happened with Jordy Nelson. We saw what happened with Randall Cobb, where they broke out third, fourth year, and then they just were never the same receiver again. There's a reason why the Packers have only won 2 Super Bowls in spite of that talent, right?
Yeah,
They've had
very true.
the Dallas Cowboys, that's another team where it's basically they just pay at the skill position players, not really going for depth. So at the end of the day, it's just really balancing everything offensively, trying to be able to maintain a good enough offensive line at certain positions. Might be guards, interior presence, or tackles, depends on the team. And being able to find out what you have with your team, whether you have the elite quarterbacks of the elites where you can focus on, the Mahomes and not have to worry about the run game, receivers, or is it a team that's run heavy where you focus on that running back, like what the Titans did with Derrick Henry, what the Cowboys usually do with their running backs, whatnot? Defensively, like we talked about, it's very much dependent on your 4-3, 3-4 scheme. In a more pass heavy system, you're usually going to focus more on the edge, interior D lineman, and cornerback. But in this day and age, also the safety. Now, when it
Yeah,
comes to punter and kicker, very straightforward. Punters and kickers usually get paid somewhere from $2 to $5 million. That's starting to increase a little bit more, but special teams, there are enough kickers where the market isn't necessarily oversaturated, but there are enough kickers where it's still rare enough position where you still have to pay them, where you still have to pay them in the millions rather than the thousands, which not even long snappers get. So it kind of goes to show you how valuable that position is, especially for the Chiefs and the Ravens of the world who have Justin Tuckers and Harrison Butkers. At the end of the day, comes down to the key term when it comes to economics in general, which is supply and demand. That's the NFL in its whole. The salary cap really depends on supply and demand of the positions. It really depends on just being able to spread the wealth. And that's as a result why the NFL has so much parity, because there is a
right.
lot of variety in how teams play and a lot of variety in how teams structure the rosters, and is usually built from the draft, which gives a lot of different interesting results. From the Winning Browns podcast. Due to some technical difficulties, Akhilesh was not able to get on this last segment of the video. This was just an outro. We had pretty much finished what we were saying, but we want to thank you guys for watching another episode of the Winning Browns podcast. Please make sure to like and subscribe. Share this video with any of your friends. We would love to get the content out to as many people as possible, especially with this episode. Um, being able to kind of educate um, people on the different schematics and the different economics involved in football. Um, this has been a fun video for both of us. I know I can speak for Akilesh on that as well as myself. And once again, we'd like to thank you guys so much for your support. And make sure to watch the next video. Peace.